Hey everybody, my name is Adam Neely. I'm here answering all of your questions about bass and music in general, so let's get started. Brendan Hayes writes, question for your next Q&A. What exactly is polytonality, and how can I incorporate it into my compositions? So polytonal music is music that has more than one key center. And the question is, of course, why would you want to do that? I love using food analogies to describe music's effect on us, and the best way I know how to describe polytonal music is it's quite spicy.
Nice and hot and nice and spicy!
A good way of gauging the heat of polytonal music is by taking a look at the circle of fifths. If the key centers are close to one another, it won't be that spicy. So for example, if I sing Happy Birthday in the key of G while accompanying myself in the key of C, it will be fairly mild.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Dan Aykroyd, who was born this day on July 1st in 1952. Happy birthday to you.
It might sound a little strange, a little off, but we can ratchet up the spice level by moving around the circle of fifths to say the key of E.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Missy Elliott, who was also born on July 1st. Happy birthday to you.
Whew, muy picante. What if we ratchet up the spice level even more to the key of F sharp?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Liv Tyler, also a July 1st baby. Happy birthday to you.
By this point, the spice level might not be tolerable for most people in this musical dish that we've been cooking up. The dish has been ruined by too much spice. And yet, this relationship between C and F sharp, this tritone relationship, is the same one that Stravinsky used in his ballet Petrouchka. It's kind of this mocking quality to it, right? There's a good reason for that. In the ballet Petrouchka, the character of Petrouchka is this jester ragdoll, and whenever you hear this polytonal texture, it's Petrouchka making fun of other characters. The spice works in that context, the same way that it might work in, say, a chicken vindaloo. God, do I love food metaphors. Context, of course, matters here. You wouldn't normally sing Happy Birthday to You as a polytonal piece of music, but of course, that invariably almost always happens.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
In earlier Western music, the superimposition of different key centers, when done intentionally, was mainly treated as kind of a joke. The second movement of Heinrich Biber's Battalia a 10 contains passages where all the players play different tunes in different keys, meant to imitate drunken sailors drunkenly singing off-key. That is certainly spicy, but at the time it was treated as kind of a novelty. It wasn't until the 20th century where we developed our taste for spice in earnest. Polytonality is heavily associated with American composer Charles Ives. The story goes is that when Charles Ives was first learning about music, his father put him in the middle of Main Street in his New England town and had two marching bands playing different songs pass him. This sort of cacophonous effect was normalized for Charles Ives, and so he often wrote music that had this intense tension between different strata. This can be heard in his piece, The Unanswered Question, which starts with some calm and tranquil G major material, simple triads in the strings, not a lot of tension there. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, in C sharp melodic minor, we get a trumpet playing some weird stuff. After a little bit more of the strings chilling out in G major, we get the woodwinds coming at you with some more weird stuff. It sounds kind of like a joke, right? Well, in this case, it's actually telling a pretty important story, a story that can only be told with polytonality. The calm and tranquil G major strings represents the oneness of the universe. This oneness is interrupted by the nagging question, the unanswered question that the trumpet asks. Why are we here? The woodwinds then give their attempt at answering this unanswered question? It doesn't really seem to be a satisfactory answer at all, and so the trumpet then asks the question again. This continues over and over. The trumpet keeps asking the question and the woodwinds keep giving their crappy answer until the woodwinds just kind of give up. This piece of music had a profound influence on film composer Bernard Herrmann, who was a major champion of the piece. Bernard Herrmann used polytonality in tons of classic film scores, like the film score for Citizen Kane and The Birds and Psycho. You might of course recognize this theme from The Twilight Zone, which juxtaposes E major-ish with C major. Film music, by the way, used to be a lot spicier. Go check out anything that Bernard Herrmann ever wrote. It's pretty damn intense, and it's awesome. Modern film and television composers like Jeff Beal, who wrote the theme for House of Cards, use polytonality as a tension-building storytelling device.
And that's my favorite part, probably, because that's the part where you have A major in the right hand and A minor in the left hand. And it's wrong, but it felt right to me. It felt like this, to me, as simple as it is, this is like the stubbornness of Frank. He's not going to change. He's just going to keep plowing through everybody.
A major against A minor is very spicy, of course. It is certainly not right for every circumstance, the same way that ghost peppers are not right for every dish. And yet, it can be a very powerful tool in your arsenal as a musician. Yes, I know we are mixing literary and food metaphors here, but this is how we're doing it, so whatever. Jeff T writes,
all the great composers of the past are rolling over in their graves over the fact that music is a f***ing meme now. Nobody actually takes music seriously anymore, even the so-called pros. Disgusting. So you know the whole meme where it's like a popular song, but then the vocals are a half step out of key? That's literally polytonality. Polytonality is literally that meme. I actually made a video about this a couple years ago. The entire concept of polytonality started as just a joke, because it is kind of funny. What would happen if there are two keys happening at the same time? Oh, it'd sound terrible. And then people realized, wait a second, there might be something we can do with this. By joking around, but treating the joke seriously, you could get some pretty awesome pieces of music. That's where it started, as a joke, but then it grew into a vibrant means of communicating musical information. I think, and I hope, this is going to happen with some of the musical memes here on this channel. There's a New York Times writer by the name of Nitsu Abebe who tweeted that Black Midi, the band, awesome band, reminds me, I feel like 2020's music is gonna be real heavy on high-skilled young musicians who grew up steeped in the tropes and in-jokes of example music theory YouTube. 2027's hottest song is To Like and Subscribe. It's got everything, aggressive harmonic substitution, 7/11 polyrhythms, a gent version of the lick. I sincerely hope this sort of thing would happen. It would make me so happy. People would take these memes and jokes and turn it into some sort of meaningful musical language, because this is the exact same sort of thing that happened with polytonality. Mozart, one of the great composers that you say is rolling in his grave because of these memes, used polytonality as a joke in his piece, A Musical Joke. All the great composers of the past are rolling over in their graves over the fact that music is a f***ing meme now.
It's important to contextualize this, and it's also important, for me anyway, to not take any of this too seriously. I certainly don't want to use the music that I listen to and the music that I make as some sort of status symbol by taking it so seriously that I feel like I am better than. But I also want to give music the respect that I feel like it deserves. There's always a back and forth there, but I feel like for the most part, people will take music a little bit too seriously, and I think that's something that we need to correct. So. Get out there and play some 7 against 11 polyrhythms, kids. Ike Zhang writes, question for your next Q&A. What is the Picardy third? The Picardy third occurs whenever you have a composition in a minor key that doesn't end on where you would expect it to, on a minor chord. It ends on a major chord. Surprising, right? And yet it's somehow bright and hopeful. It's like we've been telling the sad story in a minor key and we need to have some kind of happy ending, and that happy ending is, of course, the Picardy third. This was done quite frequently in the Baroque era because it was believed that ending on a minor chord would not feel very final. Major chords occur naturally in the overtone series built up from a fundamental, not minor chords. So by ending on a major tonic chord, it would feel like we've arrived at a final destination. The musicologist Peter Kivy would say that major chords are not only the most musically consonant chord, they are the most emotionally consonant chord. Now this sort of thing, the effect of the Picardy third, might sound a little bit too maybe cheesy to you, the same way that having happy endings for every story might feel a little too saccharine. That was definitely the case with Romantic era composers, like Chopin, for example, who tended to eschew the Picardy third and just end their minor key compositions on minor chords like they wanted to in the first place. Styles and tastes change though, so maybe if you're interested in that particular kind of color, the Picardy third might be an option for you.
Craig Smith writes, question. I have quite short fingers and I've recently tried to adopt your left wrist technique. However, I'm struggling to maintain a straighter wrist when playing on the lower end of the bass. My fingers can't quite reach and therefore I find myself arching my wrist to actually be able to reach. Any suggestions on how to improve on this?
Okay, so first of all, I know that keeping a straight and relaxed left-hand wrist is absolutely essential for long-term health when you're playing the bass guitar. There are two easy tricks that I want to share with you that can help make this work. The first trick is that if you notice that when I'm sitting down and playing the bass right here, my bass is actually angled away from me at about a 45-degree angle. This might be counterintuitive, but by actually pointing the bass kind of away from you, it actually helps in getting your wrist into the right position so you don't hurt yourself. Another counterintuitive trick is to bring the left elbow towards the neck so that your forearm is almost kind of at a parallel to the neck. There's this tendency for whenever people are trying to get a straight wrist to throw the elbow out and away from the neck, and that actually can be counterproductive. These are some basic tips, but I strongly suggest that you go and find a teacher that can help you with your technique because it's difficult to teach technique through YouTube videos. Keep that in mind, and also keep in mind the fact that all technique should be in service of your body, not in service of the instrument. Make the instrument work for you and not the other way around.
Jack Mahlmann writes, Adam, you mentioned how easy it was to practice with the Mongolian performers because music can be a lingua franca. Can you say more about how this worked? Did they use the same terms we use?
Yeah, so when I was in Mongolia recently with the band Aberdeen, we rehearsed with a bunch of different Mongolian musicians who played a bunch of different styles of music. And the extent of my Mongolian is pretty much just Sanbano, Bairkla, and of course my favorite word of all time, za, which just means literally anything, za. But beyond that, my Mongolian is totally useless, so we often had to rely on a translator, which poses some very interesting problems when you're talking about music. For example, if we or the Mongolian musicians wanted to communicate that a section was supposed to be played rubato, how would a translator who has no knowledge of music translate that? Even the phrase that we use to describe rubato playing in English, playing out of time, probably won't translate literally that well into every language. I'm consistently amazed at what translators have to do, translating ideas and idioms from one language to the next, but music is an idea and an idiom entirely to itself. What that basically means is that it was just way easier to have one group play the music as they wanted it to be played and have the other group of musicians listen. It also definitely helped that the musical director of a Yalgu band, the children's ensemble, wrote sheet music for us to read. And in that way, sheet music and musical notation is a kind of universal language for musicians the world over.
Emma writes, you have to admit, it's not exactly a good look to take part in a diplomacy program funded by a government that has a long and storied history in Western imperialism, right?
Okay, so this is definitely something that we considered before going on our State Department tour of Kyrgyzstan and Mongolia. Aberdeen, the band, was wondering, hey, is this paternalistic? Is this cultural imperialism? And there's an important thing to consider when you're talking about this. In normal circumstances, when you don't have the government funding an arts program like AMA, American Music Abroad, our primary concern as a band and as musicians is economic. In other words, in our current capitalist system, our primary concern is whether or not a local population and community can afford to bring us there. If they don't have the money to bring us there, we can't come because then we lose money. Money is the reason why it makes sense for me to tour in, say, Europe and the UK, and not necessarily that much economic sense to tour in Kyrgyzstan and Mongolia. It comes down to this. We simply could not have done the tour without AMA, and to do the tour without AMA is to make a value judgment on the people in Kyrgyzstan and Mongolia and saying, you aren't worthy of this music because it makes no economic sense to travel there. If the free market was the only arbiter of where musicians traveled in the world and who they collaborated with and who they interacted with and who benefits from those interactions, if that was the only thing there, I don't think that would lead to the most equitable and richest and truest music that we could possibly have. Because valuing somebody's cultural and musical worth purely in monetary terms doesn't feel right to me. And I feel like there's a lot more that we can experience in the world if we're not thinking all the time about that particular side of things. And unfortunately, that's kind of what we have to do as musicians sometimes. James Weidner writes, Bethesda, why not attend University of Maryland's School of Music? So here's a story. I went to the Berklee College of Music for my undergraduate degree, but I actually didn't get in immediately. I was deferred entry a semester, so I applied for the fall and didn't actually start until the spring. That was pretty demoralizing for me, but at least I got in. The only other school that I got into was the University of Maryland at College Park. So I decided to spend the semester that I was waiting to get into Berklee there. Now, the unfortunate thing is I didn't get into the music program at University of Maryland at College Park. I auditioned for the School of Music on my electric bass guitar, and of course that's why I didn't get in, because I was playing bass guitar. Unfortunately, still, in a lot of collegiate music programs, there is a very heavy emphasis against bass guitar in favor of upright bass. So anyway, I spent my first semester at University of Maryland taking care of gen ed credits, and then eventually I transferred to Berklee, where electric bass is seen as a legitimate instrument. What did I learn from this? Well, one, pay close attention to what kind of music program you're applying to and whether or not electric bass is kosher. And two, take your gen ed credits at someplace other than Berklee College of Music, because they're going to be a lot less expensive and your teachers are going to be a lot better. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. If you have a question for a future Q&A, please leave it in the comment section below. Remember to comment, like, and subscribe, and play that gent lick in 7 Against 11 while juggling polyrhythms, and until next time.